Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we've got 7 games here on this slate for you on Wednesday night. In this game, we are taking a look at the Chicago Bulls playing host to the Sacramento Kings, probably the Pacific winning Sacramento Kings. Also got another game up for you tonight and our player props, so make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Also want you to head to thelines.com. Nate and I are throwing the picks up there now in a couple articles. Mo's throwing some picks on there as well, so make sure you head over there, check out all the NBA action we have on the site right now. Also want you to head to thelines.com to use that odds finder tool. That's where you can go ahead and get the best odds available to you from all these U.S. sports books that are giving us bets in the NBA this season. Nate, let's run through this slate real quick for everyone tonight and then talk about this game, Sac in Chicago.
Yeah, we got the grind fest here at Miami. Memphis is +4 in that one. The other game we break down, Philly -2.5 at Cleveland. We'll see about Jared Allen's status. Cavs on a back-to-back. Totals rising to 222 there. Lakers on a back-to-back -3 at Houston. The Kings are in a pick'em here at the Bulls. Total's been bet down a little from 239 to 236. Celtics -5 at Minnesota, trying to get back on track. Mavs -6 at Spurs. Luka's out. Kyrie is questionable. So we'll see there if it's another Jaden Hardy game. And then the Warriors trying to buy a win on the road. +2 at the Clippers. 237 total out there. Yeah, I mean, we were both on this total under 239 last night. The Bulls have been incredible defensively and match up very well against the Kings. I mean, you look no further than how they played each other last time. A 110-101 game in Sacramento. Zach LaVine goes nuts, and the Bulls, still don't score very much. They have one of the ugliest half-court offenses we have seen in recent memory. And now they're playing. That was an Alex Caruso game, as exemplified by his 30 minutes, 0 points, positive impact. And now they have 2 of those guys in Pat Bev and Caruso. I don't know what you want to call them. I guess the Bash brothers, or something along those lines. People can workshop it. But, I mean, the point is that it's going to be a bit of a tough night for De'Aaron Fox against these guys. To be able to get out and transition and score a lot. I mean, Chicago's limiting everything right now since the All-Star break, really about the last 15 games, right? So count 7 before the break or so, though they floundered into the break with the horrible offense. But just looking since the break, number 1 in points allowed, number 1 paid points allowed, number 1 by far in fast break points allowed, allowing under 7 per game. So that's a Kings thing right there. Number 4 in free throw attempt allowed, and Kings are 4th in free throw rate in that span. And then their offense is like I'm saying, I mean, they score the 2nd lowest percentage of points off threes, 9th lowest in the paint. As always with the DeRozan team, they're number 2 in mid-range points. But that's, DeRozan is having maybe a career worst year, you could say, after a career best year last year. Yep. And they've been awful in the clutch, the Bulls. So if you feel like this total is dropping too much, I think what we do is go back to trusting the Kings in a close game here. The Bulls are 2-5 in their last 7 clutch games, 21st in offensive rating. On the season, Kings, just on the road on the season, the number 1 offense in the clutch, number 2 net. You look at their last 8 clutch overall, they've won 6 of them. They're 4-0 in OT. They're 26-10 against teams with losing records. The Bulls are 1-4 in OT, 3-6 in one possession games. So if it's close, I mean, you gotta like the Kings here. You look at the Bulls, say, well, they just popped up with a win in Denver and they held Denver to 96, and that's impressive. But then you look at what Denver's done since, which is just not come out against anybody with any sort of intensity, and then that win looks a lot less impressive. And before that, the Bulls had lost 7 straight when listed as underdogs, just not stepping up against the top tier teams the way we saw them pop up a little bit early in the season. Right now, they're trying to creep into the play-in here by beating the teams they can beat, but they just haven't been a match for the top teams in the NBA.
Yeah, it's sad. What's going on in Chicago? If you told me they had the 5th best defensive rating at the beginning of this season, I'd be like, oh, what are they, like the 4 seed? A team with those guys on it is 5th in defensive rating. So what are they're 12th in offensive rating, and then they're a top 4 seed in the East, and they're just brutal on offense. And it's DeMar DeRozan. Unsurprisingly, the regression coming for this whole offense is based around its best player not being as good as he was last season, regardless of LaVine coming back, because he missed a lot of last season. At the same time, he's been going off as of late, and that's great for him. But even in this last matchup versus Sac, you saw what happened when he had 41, like you said, and shot 16 for 28 from the field overall, which is bananas. That's Kobe Bryant. So by the way, the Toronto Raptors would like a word for worst offensive half-court offense in the league as well. But they could definitely split that right now with Chicago of any teams that aren't just obviously tanking. So, yeah, I think in this one, I do lean under. I think what happened in Sac in that last game too, right? Like that's a little bit telling of what Chicago can do to a total, just tank it because they can't score. And even on defense, like they are, it's not just that they're good, man. Like they're legitimately good because they get back on defense and they defensive rebound, period. They don't let you get fast break points. And once your possession is done, it's done. Right. And that's huge for them. So I think that's going to be the key in this one because, you definitely touched on it, but like it's the key stats here it's not even necessarily because, by the way, Sacramento has been really, really good on the road from deep, like ridiculously good and good for most of the season, but like really, really good, like 17 points on 41, 17 made threes on 41% good, which is like Steph Curry good, right? Warriors good. So that doesn't even necessarily matter as much. I mean, Chicago has been playing well on defense as well, but against the 3 as well. I mean, specifically, but those threes are coming in transition as well. They're hitting like 4 transition threes a game are the Kings, and because they're coming down and pulling on that fast break as well. But we just mentioned how Chicago gets back and limits all of that. They don't turn the ball over. Chicago, they limit their opponents' points off of turnovers. Once again, a fast break stat in transition that the Kings want to run, and Chicago just limits that. So I think there's a good reason, aside from DeMar not being able to score in this last game that they met, there's still a good reason that went under, just in sort of the flow that these two teams play. 12 and 20 to the over on the road, Sacramento. We know they score 7, their games average 7 more games at home than they do on the road. 236 is actually what their games average on the road. And I think you've got to bump that down a bit just because of the fact that Chicago plays so slowly at home over their last 6 games at home, a 94 pace, which is good for slowest in the league. Actually, the 28th slowest pace is at 96, getting 2 extra possessions. That's how much slower they're playing than the team just 2 spots behind them in terms of slowest pace. They go 13 and 20 to the over at home, and those games are averaging 225, and they're going under by an average of 4. And then just because I didn't really have much else to do with my time, I went back through their last 23 games and saw that they went under 21 times in 23 games if that total was 237. So they haven't hit more than 237 in a game more than twice in their last 23 games, regardless of venue. And I just told you they go under way more at home than they do on the road for the Bulls this season. So I think they're just going to lock it in. They're going to play defense. They're going to have the Bash Bros, Smash Bros, whatever you want to call Caruso and Pat Bev. They're going to have them in a good spot to be able to hound them in the exact areas that Chicago wants to do everything they do, right at the point of attack with De'Aaron Fox. If Pat Bev gets in front of him, slows that down, slows everything down. So I think this is a good opportunity for that to go under like 235 even. And definitely also really, I lean Kings with you on this one as well. I believe in them and the way they're playing even on the road, though they are better at home. They've won 4 in a row on the road right now, the Kings. So I feel pretty good about them.
Yeah, I mean, we've been on this for a couple months being like Kings on the road are going under. The line isn't going to be set properly. But now I think it is kind of rounding back into form in terms of Vegas being like, yeah, we understand that trend too, or the public being all over. That's why you're seeing it be bet down a little bit. And the one thing that does give me pause is how are they both number 1 in effective field goal percentage and dead last in field goal percentage allowed since the break? I mean, that's like over City when they're the most efficient team and the least efficient defense. But I mean, I can look at the game log and say, like, I respect all the offenses they've played. That includes the ridiculous high scoring game against the Clippers. The one time they faced what I would consider a truly bad offense, the Pelicans, they held them to 108. So I think the Kings are capable of playing good defense if they're not playing, a powerhouse like the Bucks or the Suns or one of those high scoring teams. And the Bulls, as we mentioned, are far from a powerhouse offensively. They have this extremely choppy, gross style. There's really no trend to look at in terms of their over or under against the Western Conference. It's basically just alternated consistently. But there is a trend to say at home, especially recently, that they're gonna go way under this total if they're able to dictate the pace at all. And the Kings, away from home, less able to dictate that pace. Probably going to be pacing themselves a little bit more on this road trip as well, and just trying to get out of here with a close win. So yeah, I'm still with you on the under at 236. I think if it drops any more, I would start to shy away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling so confident, and I'm not like telling anybody to do anything. I'm never telling anybody on this show to do anything. But I am saying for myself, because I'm feeling frisky, like maybe I just go ahead and take an alt under, because I could see this going under 230. And I think 236.5 is still a good number to get under at, like I said, especially with, I'm just believing in the Bulls and the way that they can control the pace a little bit more at home because they have their guards. Wonder what would happen if Lonzo Ball was playing in this game. I don't know if we'd take an under necessarily. Probably go a bit more over, despite how good he is on defense. He also opens up that offense. But come back, Lonzo. We miss you.
Sixers Cavs here. 219 was where the total started, and I don't think we're alone in saying we'll take the over on that. The Cavs are still the number one scoring defense in the league, but lately they've been a little less impressive. I mean, their games have averaged 225, and they've gone over 9 of their last 12. And it's not just a case of opponent, because they got back-to-back games against Miami in there. So that's about as low scoring as it can get. They are on a back-to-back, and they do tend to go under more often. And they're 8-3 the under on those back-to-backs, but they're scoring a little bit more. 108 per game versus 105 on normal rest. And this, to me, is more about the Sixers. This game, to me, is more about Joel Embiid and him just dominating and putting another feather in his cap for MVP. Whether Jared Allen plays or not, I don't think he cares. In his last 9 against Allen, he's averaging 30 and 13, 5 assists, and that includes a couple lines last February: 40, 14, and 10, 42, 13, and 6 against Allen. Got 15 free throws in both of those, and he's just been unstoppable really for a couple months now. But since the All-Star break, he looked 35 points a game on 38% usage, 14 free throws, also 2.5 blocks with a 114 defensive rating. There's certainly blood in the water here with the Nuggets faltering and Jokic losing on the narrative. I mean, very strong narratives for Embiid. He's now plus 165 to win MVP, where he was plus 450 a couple weeks ago. And so I think he just comes out with another MVP caliber performance. And if Jared Allen is not available, then that is trouble for the Cavs, right? I mean, is Evan Mobley going to be guarding this guy for most of the game? And maybe that kind of throws him off in terms of a quicker defender, but Embiid bullying dudes right now. And the Sixers are on 2 days rest here versus a team that's on a back-to-back. They are 38-19 when they get at least a day off this year. They're 12-5 as road favorites, which they are here. This is straight up numbers. And also, that's their most consistent over situation, 12-5 to the over by 6 points per game. Their offense in their last 12, they're number 1 in 3-point shooting, obviously number 1 in free throws. Their scoring is up to 119, so their games are averaging 231. Even at a slow pace, they've gotten to some really high totals, like 263 at Milwaukee at a 93 pace. And it's like, how did that happen? Well, the Sixers hit 18 threes. They hit 30. They had 37 free throw attempts and hit 31 of those. And the Cavs, to me, I mean, I might call them the baby Cavs, not because they are so young across the board. I mean, they are pretty young, but it's kind of an interesting, like, they're a step or two in the evolution behind the Bucks and in the way they play defense too. And they're getting roasted from the 3-point line because they haven't made that same adjustment that the Bucks have made. I believe they're 28th in opponents' 3-point percentage in these last 12. That's why we've been going over. So you match up against the Sixers team that's number 1 in threes right now, getting great shots, high assist rate. Cavs are very low in assist rate right now. And they're scoring their highest points off turnovers, and Philly's third in limiting that. So there's a lot of advantages here for Philly, who just beat them right before the break when the Cavs were hot. and the bad loss when the last time they were at Cleveland in late November, you could throw that away. I mean, there was no Harden and Maxey, and that was when the Sixers were in an absolute funk. They lost 2 more after that. Now they are, rolling. They are very impressive, and Embiid is just an unstoppable force.
He is. He's an unstoppable force, and what's interesting is like they've gotten better. Philly's just sort of changed, honestly. Like there was a point in the season where I think we were all a little bit down on them, obviously before Embiid went on his tear, which it seems like he just does every year now. There's going to be 20 games where he's like, no, I'm the best player. And it's like unquestionable for 20 games. But I don't know. He seems to rotate between like the 3 other guys that we could consider the best player in the league. But what's interesting too is James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, really just James Harden. I think he's even extra pissed that he didn't get that All-Star vote. He's like, I finally just play the way that everyone in the media tells me I should be playing, where I'm dishing like crazy and I'm just controlling the game with my vision and my handles. And I don't get the MVP. And so now I'm even more pissed, and now I'm averaging even more assists. And also it's just leading to Philly playing slightly differently. I think they're pushing it, even if their pace remains a little bit, stagnant at times. It's pretty even. It's like middle of the league, if you will, but they've pushed it a lot, even on a made basket. Like they're clearly getting the ball out of the rim and going, and Embiid is running straight down the floor, but so is Harden and Maxey. They're just pushing the ball each and every chance they get. That's why they've over their last 7, where you mentioned they've won 6 of 7 overall, including like a number of high scoring affairs for the 76ers in that time frame, because they sure, you play the Bucks and you play the Pacers, even the Timberwolves, the Timberwolves couldn't score, so that game went under. But the Sixers had 117 points and still pushed the pace there. But even against the Heat and the Mavs, and this team is scoring, right? 120 against the Heat. The Mavs don't play defense anymore, so they got 126 against them. But that was also a game with Kyrie and Luka that we probably should have done a better job of seeing, that Kyrie and Luka can't lose every game they play together, and they played really well in that one at home. Point being, like, they're getting fast break points. That's what's doing it. They're just pushing it. They're pushing the ball even out of the made basket. They're also getting a ton more like defensive plays in transition, defensive plays around the rim. They were giving up a ton of fast break points. They were giving up a ton of points around the rim and second chance points. And in their last 7, they're limiting all of those things. They're back to like top 5, where you thought they would be with the best center in the league, probably the best overall defensive and offensive combined. Yeah, I don't think that's a question for Embiid, for what he does and in the way that he's finally been able to be that guy in the post, that's been able to give them something behind their defenders on the wing, who were also much better this season. Last year they were awful against the 3. This year they're much better against the 3. So I like their opportunities there. I like them in this game a bit more. I'm honestly a little bit scared of the Cavs' ability to score like this. I know there's a bit more points on the back-to-back for this team at times, but we've also just seen them come out and have some weird, like, stagnant offensive games that does scare me a little bit. I do agree that Philly's going to keep this thing going so much that, like, it's more likely that it goes over, and that's why it's been bet up. It was way too low to start. People just saw Cavs and thought, under at home, and they played last night, so they're tired legs or whatever. And I'm not necessarily buying into that, but I think what I'm saying is I feel a lot more strongly about Embiid and the Sixers being able to continue what they're doing, even in the situation, especially if Jared Allen doesn't play.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sixers to win is the preferred look here, but some things in support of the over. I mean, you talked about Kairuka real quick as a kind of a tangent, but it's relevant here because we're talking about a dominant backcourt now going up against a team that can't guard athletic guards. Last time they met, Garland went 10 for 14 from the floor and could have scored more if he had higher usage. Donnie had 33 points. The Cavs also scored 74 in the second half of that game. So they just really started slow, and it still got to 230 in Philly, granted. And Philly's a little lower scoring on the road, but more of the Cavs situation here. They're 9-6 to the over when they are underdogs. In that underdog role, Donnie kind of relishes, right, in saying, like, okay, I'm just going to go out and get 40. I'm going to keep us in it. Whatever we can't do defensively, especially, against a guy like Embiid, he will just match you. This is only the second time they've been underdogs at home all year, and that first one did go over by 7 points. So I think there's a situation to say the under is looking good here, but again, you look at clutch numbers, and if this goes down to the stretch, the baby Cavs, they don't have enough experience is why I don't think they're really a threat in the playoffs, is that they're 27th in offensive rating, their last 8 clutch games. And Philly somehow number one in defense in their last 11 clutch, winning 7 of those against some really good teams. So I think, yeah, that's another reason to just say Embiid will have his fingerprints all over this one, whether it's on the defensive end down the stretch too, to help them get the win. And yeah, I'll just save some of this for player props, but 35 and a win for Embiid at plus 230. Don't mind that at FanDuel.
Yeah, and either way, this game is going to have implications for the MVP races. It seems like every single game does have now. I don't want to call it recency bias, man. There's 82 games in this season, and if Embiid continues to play this way down the stretch, and the Nuggets continue to lose the way they have been down the stretch, even if Joker's playing well, which he's not playing as well, especially not as well as Embiid right now. I just wanted to touch on that for a second because, like I said, every game that the 76ers and the Nuggets and maybe the Bucks play for the rest of the season, probably not the Bucks nearly as much as in Embiid's case, but they're close, and it's a lot closer than people might have thought when Jokic was like minus 250 or 300 to win MVP around the All-Star break. It's a little bit more fun than that now. So Nate, let's go ahead and jump right into your first NBA play-up prop, Embiid.
Yeah, I mean, I think he smells the opportunity to get the MVP here and has been playing like the MVP over the last couple weeks since the All-Star break, 35 points per game. You look at just in March, 37 per game, basically on a 38.5% usage, 136 offensive rating, also a 114 defensive rating. So putting his fingerprints all over this, showing this is Joel Embiid, of course, that he is a little bit more valuable than Jokic perhaps on that end as a two-way player. And we're talking about a game against the Cavs, the number one scoring defense in the league, but haven't had many answers for Embiid, even when Jared Allen is active. He's averaged 30 per game in his last 9 against Allen, including a couple monster 40-point lines last February, getting the line 15 and a half times in those games. And that's the key for Embiid is can you keep him off the line? Probably not. I mean, he's averaging 14 free throw attempts per game since the All-Star break. And on the road, 13 per game in his last 8 roadies, that there's a huge spike in terms of his scoring on the road, probably because the Sixers are more often in closer games and more often forced to play in the half court, I think. It's less of a maxi getting out and go. So he's averaging 34 and a half in his last 8 road games with a higher usage rate compared to 31 at home in those last 8 and 9 games. And also playing on 2 days rest here, which is another reason to like Embiid. 39% usage rate this year when he has 2 days off. So DraftKings is giving you 31.5 points at just minus 105. It's very, very generous of you. Thank you, DraftKings. 32.5 at FanDuel, also really good odds. I guess they're trying to tempt people to say like, oh, Cleveland's defense is so good. Like there's no way Embiid, it just doesn't matter. They could be playing 6-on-5 and Embiid will probably get 30 points. So I'm looking at him to handle business here. 35 plus and a win at plus 230 is worth a look. And yeah, just the MVP race is getting closer and closer. He's about plus 160 now to catch Joker.
Yeah, Joel Embiid. MVB, yeah, it should be very clear we're talking about Joel Embiid in case that wasn't clear. 31.5 points is a lot, man. They definitely do kind of seem to want us to bet on this over and entice us, and maybe they think that shouldn't be that high because of the interior defense of the Cavs. But no, Allen's a huge deal. Mobley, as good as he is, all over the place, to be honest, is an amazing defender, but not necessarily going to be a match for Joel one-on-one, as nobody in the league is. So I think it's a good opportunity for sure to keep going with Joel. Like I'll trust you on it. I don't know that I'm going to be putting any money on Embiid tonight, but because it's just so high and I'm scared of it. But it's definitely not a bad bet with all the numbers he threw out there to indicate he's going to go over. So Desmond Bane under 23.5 points. It doesn't sound like a lot for a guy who is playing without Ja Morant, and maybe last season especially you think, oh, Ja's out, just take Bane's overs. But it's not quite that simple right now for him. It's 23.5 points, which is kind of high. It's actually minus 130 on DraftKings for him to go under, much worse than the over, which is actually even money for him to get over on DraftKings as well. Another little tempting, enticing over, right, that they want us to take here. But I would also just say, before I even continue, I might take over on the assists at 5.5, which is plus 120 20 on DraftKings and gets you really good odds. And here's why I'm looking at this. And I've been looking at Bane a couple times. I talked about him on Player Props on an article on thelines.com a few days ago as well, and had some similar things to say as what I'm about to say right now, which is, first of all, this game's going to be low scoring. It's the Heat. It's no Ja Morant. We've seen that in the last 2 times these teams has been without Ja, one without Bane, and the games are averaging 194 points because Memphis is averaging 103, and the Heat are averaging 91. So I do think it's going to be another, as you said at the top when you were reading those lines, a grit and grind kind of game for sure. And Bane without Ja this season, a little bit better, but 21 points versus 22 points. Still doesn't get you to the points prop, and that's in 9 games. It's just a 1-point uptick. He does go from 3 assists to 5.6, 5.7 assists per game without Ja. And in the last 2 games that Ja hasn't played, we're talking about assist totals of like 9 and 8, right? So he's been going up a lot more. Also, something that was very interesting, in the one game that Ja and Bane did not play against Miami, Tyus Jones had 10 assists and nobody else had more than 2. Because nobody else can assist on this team besides, Tyus Jones or Ja, and in this case, Desmond Bane. I think they know that without Ja out there, they have even fewer ball handlers, and they really only have like 1, maybe 2 besides him that can really play make. So he needs to do that. In his last 2 versus Miami, who's amazing against shooting guards, where they limit points to the tune of the third fewest to shooting guards. In his last 2 versus the Heat last season, 19 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. That was in 29 and a half minutes. He'll probably get closer to 35 tonight, but I don't think that gets him enough points to get there. The assists you might consider, the other thing I was going to say is the Heat do allow the 8th most assists per game to shooting guards. So if there is a stat that you're going to give up to Bane, who has been getting more of those stats and has gotten over 5.5 assists in 4 of his last 5 without Ja Morant, the 5.5 assists for really good odds feels great. The under 24 points tonight also just feels like something that's going to have to happen in a low scoring game against this Heat squad.
Yeah, I think you're right on the logic here. If you wanted to take over on assists, I think I would just go 10.5 rebounds assists, because we're talking about that type of game, right, where the Heat are like 28th in offense, and there's going to be boards. 15 rebounds and assists for Bane in consecutive games. The second one in just 29 minutes against the Mavs.
Good call.
So yeah, I do think he'll be piling up peripherals, and I think it'll be right around 20, 22 points. So it's a little scary to take minus 130 on the under for me. But I do think, he's gonna have a lot of responsibilities here for the Grizz. I'm looking at former Grizzly Mike Conley, who is starting to settle into his role here with Minnesota. Aside from that really ugly offensive game for the entire team against Philly, he's been a reliable source of stats. I mean, those other 4 games and you're talking about his last 5, in 4 of those, 17.5 points per game, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. So he's cruised past a prop of 20.5 PRA in those games. And Boston is not a shutdown force right now at all. Rob Williams is out. And that to me means I like both Conley and Gobert to get theirs going, to get going in the pick and roll game, to get the lob game going. Rudy is even money to have 15 points in this spot. Boston has given up 61 paint points in their last 3 road games with a 118 defensive rating. They've also gave up 27 assists to a Houston Rockets team in losing to them. A Houston Rockets team that has no interest in sharing the ball with each other. And so Conley, he's going to be distributing. It's tempting plus 125 odds for him to get 6 dimes here. I think the safer bet is to lump it all together. Assume he gets about 11, 12 points. He has had success against Boston, even as an old man in December of last season. 29, 4, and 7 at home with the Jazz. That's a season and a half ago. But averaging 19 and 4.5 assists in his last 5 against Marcus Smart and company. And I just don't think Boston is bringing that same intensity right now. So I look for Minnesota to have some success here with that pick and roll game.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I think what's interesting about Conley is just it's like a revival. I mean, maybe he just needed to be closer to Rudy. I don't know, but yeah, I like this game tonight as well. The Celtics kind of struggling, like you said. So there's definitely some opportunity. We've talked about Marcus Smart not playing that well as well, if you're talking about the other perimeter defense there. So Conley should be okay tonight. And I like what's happened for his career, because I thought he might still have a little bit left to offer. And I think he definitely is showing that he does. So Let's talk about a point guard on the other side of his career at the very beginning, Mr. Jaden Hardy, who we do not have any props for. Full discrepancy that we do not know what his props are yet, but we do not care. As Nate said very eloquently, Jaden Hardy, I don't care what his props are over, is what we're choosing tonight. You could take the rebounds and assists. You could take the points. I'd really just go for the points, right? Like it's probably going to be like 16.5 is my throwing my guess out there after he's had back-to-back 20-point performances, including 28. He does play point guard, so we do want Kyrie to sit to make sure we get over it, but you might still get some late props for Jaden Hardy, even if Kyrie is declared eligible to play tonight by the coaching staff and the training staff there. I don't know why you would bring him back in a game against the Spurs. Maybe you just want to make sure you win because the Spurs had a huge 18-point victory last night against those Orlando Magic. But if you also look at the Orlando Magic and what they did, who scored for them, I mean, Markelle Fultz had a fine game. If he could shoot at all, he would have been a bigger threat. But then when Cole Anthony came in, he did fine as well. So the point guards were totally fine against the Spurs last night. That's definitely not where they're going to be stopping you with their starting point guard. I believe is Devontae Graham right now. There's a couple other guys getting run in there, some that none of us have heard of, I assure you. So I think there's some pretty good opportunity to get points. And Jaden Hardy, even if he gets 31 minutes off the bench, like give me 20 on that dude for sure. I just love the way he's playing right now. So talk to me about Jaden Hardy and how much you love him as well.
Yeah, I mean, 31 minutes is a low ball. He's played 39 his last two without Kyrie. Right. And you got to think the Mavs, even if they get Kyrie in there, are going to be like, this is our identity now. We have two high volume guards. So Hardy will slide into that Luka role a little bit. I mean, 32.5% usage with both those guys out, 25 points per game on really actually poor shooting because he's playing Memphis, right? And now he's playing the Spurs. And the Spurs are on a back-to-back, like you said. Spurs are playing Devontae Graham as much as possible and sitting their lengthy defenders like Keldon Johnson and Branham because they just don't want to necessarily win too many games.
Give us Branham back.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be available much down the stretch, but I don't think his props are still going to be that high. I mean, we only have this 2-game sample size, especially if Kyrie plays. Then you're looking at like 16 points probably. Maybe if he's out, we're more around the 20-point margin, but I just think he's going to continue to see huge usage for a Mavs team that's missing a lot of key scorers.
Yeah, I'm definitely tweeting out whatever Jaden Hardy's prop is as soon as we find it for sure. So make sure you stick on that. And anyway, you have to stick on stay on top of who is going to be playing in these games as well continuously throughout the rest of the season in the NBA. So make sure to stay on thelines.com with us as well. And that's all the time we have for you. So until we see you next, happy betting.